The galactic citadel floated like a crown of obsidian in the cold silence between stars, ancient, vast, and terrible in its authority. It was said to be the most neutral place in the known galaxy, a seat of judgment for civilizations that spanned systems, a shrine to peace built atop centuries of war. But today, it pulsed with something darker. Not fear, not yet, but contempt. For humanity, inside the great chamber, the council convened in solemn formation. Dozens of species sat on elevated thrones, each radiating their own flavor of menace. Iridescent insectoids with chittering mandibles, scaled diplomats with forked tongues, gas-based intellects housed in hovering containment spheres. They spoke in harmonized whispers, but there was a hard edge to the tension. The name Earth was passed around like a curse. Primitive, unpredictable, dangerous. High Consul Viral, whose race had tamed suns and terraformed galaxies, tilted her avian head. Her voice, sharp and cruel, echoed through the hall. They send one envoy? No honor guard? No vessel of state? Are we to be insulted? A low, sonorous growl answered from a beetle-like member of the crass dominion. Perhaps they know their place. One envoy, one plea for mercy. Amid the murmurs, the doors at the far end of the chamber parted. No trumpet, no escort, just footsteps, sharp, unhurried, echoing. He entered like a shadow split from the walls, tall, immaculately dressed in a black suit that gleamed faintly under cathedral-like light. No medals, no insignia, just a suit and a silver tie pin shaped like a vertical blade. He walked down the center aisle, ignoring the way the gathered aliens leaned forward to study him. Their disdain thickened with each step. His expression remained neutral, not arrogant, not humble, just unreadable. When he reached the central platform, he stopped, raised his gaze, and met the eyes of every being in the chamber without blinking. "I am here," he said simply, his voice low but resonant. "You asked for an envoy. I'm your answer." For a moment, silence reigned. Then came laughter, dry, cruel, alien laughter from lips and mouths not made for humor. "That is your envoy?" Viral scoffed. "A mammal in a funeral suit?" His eyes flicked to her. "Closer than you think." A flicker passed between the council members, subtle but unmistakable. They'd made their decision before he even arrived. This was not diplomacy. This was theater. A setup, a test of how humans beg for their lives. The human scanned the room calmly. "I notice you haven't asked my name." "We didn't think it would matter," rasped the gelatinous creature that pulsed with bioluminescent scorn. "You won't leave here with it intact." The man nodded once, as though confirming a calculation. "Then let's not waste time." From above, the dome dimmed. A low hum began to build, a sign to the guards. Hidden hatches opened in the walls. Dozens of armored enforcers emerged silently, sleek rifles trained on the lone figure in the circle. Their armor bore no insignia. The council wanted plausible deniability. Still, the man in the suit did not flinch. In the silence before the storm, someone in the back whispered, "He isn't even armed." And the man smiled, the kind of smile that didn't reach the eyes, the kind that belonged to executioners, not emissaries. But before the trap could spring, the chamber lights flickered. A soft chime echoed once through the stone, the council's internal systems detecting something unlisted, something alien. Confusion rippled. Systems were supposed to be impenetrable. Nothing unlisted could pass through the Citadel scans. "What is that?" someone demanded. "What's that signal?" The man looked up. "That would be me." Then came the sound of metal unlocking. No movement, no weapons drawn, just a humming stop of 1,000 safety systems disengaging. The temperature dropped. Lights dimmed further. One of the guards took a step forward, weapon raised, and in that moment, the human moved. It wasn't a lunge or a charge. It was more precise than a machine, more fluid than nature. He twisted his body with bone-snapping speed, grabbed a rifle before it fired, and with a movement that defied physics, used the guard's momentum to launch him across the room into a pillar. His foot struck another guard in the throat before the first body even hit the ground. Gasps erupted. Chaos threatened to ignite. But then, just as suddenly, he froze, standing still in the center of the chamber again. one hand by his side, the other still holding the rifle, not aiming it, just holding it like an artifact. "I was sent here," he said, "because you thought you understood what humans were." He dropped the rifle. It clattered on the stone like a funeral bell. "You thought we were desperate, weak, willing to kneel." Several council members stood, shouting orders. Guards encircled the floor. Yet none dared approach again. The first two had been professionals, killed in under 2 seconds. He looked up at them. "You thought you could erase us with a ceremony, but you forgot the oldest lesson of war." A silence fell again. He leaned slightly forward. "The knife you underestimate is the one that cuts deepest." In a hidden chamber above the court, one of the lead tacticians whispered to his peer, "This is not an envoy. He's a weapon." On the council floor, Viral sneered. "You think you can intimidate the council? The oldest alliance in the galaxy?" "I don't intend to intimidate you," he said. "I intend to make a point." The room pulsed with tension. "You don't fear humanity because you've never seen what we send when we stop pretending to care about peace." His eyes narrowed. "And now you have." Then, calmly, he adjusted his tie. No alarm sounded. No proclamations were made. The air simply shifted. Like gravity itself tilted, waiting for the next drop of blood to declare which way the future would fall. He stood alone. Yet not one of them moved. Not one guard lifted a weapon again. Because now, they weren't sure what would happen if they did. They weren't sure he was alone. And most of all, they weren't sure they'd survive long enough to regret it. The man took a breath, as if measuring how much longer he needed to stay alive in this place. "You may declare your verdict," he said, voice smooth as silk and cold as vacuum. "But understand this. What happens next doesn't depend on your judgment, only on your arrogance." And then, as if he had all the time in the world, he turned and walked away, each footstep deliberate, echoing across the stone, carrying a silence louder than any weapon. By the time the doors closed behind him, the council had yet to move. He had said nothing more. He didn't need to, because now they knew. They had not summoned a diplomat. They had summoned death in a suit. The doors sealed behind him with the softest of ancient machinery, cutting off the chamber's breathless silence. Outside, the corridor stretched in pristine symmetry, a cathedral of polished stone and humming light. He walked with the same unhurried precision, as if he hadn't just declared veiled war on the most powerful assembly in the galaxy, as if none of it mattered. It wasn't the guard stationed along the corridor that moved first. They were frozen, uncertain, watching him like an animal no one could quite name. But high above, behind unseen eyes and surveillance feeds, the kill order had already been issued. It had been encoded in the Citadel's neural command chain weeks ago, triggered the moment his behavior breached protocol. One by one, compartments in the corridor's walls hissed open. Defense turrets slid out like coiled serpents, gleaming black, humming with plasma cores. Motion targeting systems locked onto him instantly. He stopped. A pause. Not of fear. Not of surprise. Anticipation. The first turret fired. A sphere of blue-white energy screamed down the corridor and missed, not because the weapon failed, but because by the time it reached where he had stood, he was gone. His body moved with surgical impossibility, a step that became a slide, a turn that dissolved into motion too swift to track. He vanished and reappeared in a single blink, right beside the first turret. One hand snapped forward. No weapon, just fingers. They struck a seam in the casing, pried, twisted. The turret spasmed once, sparks vomiting from its ports, and collapsed. The others opened fire together, turning the corridor into a storm of light and death. He danced through it, not metaphorically. His movement was balletic, fluid, seamless, a weave of death through machinery. The floor sang with shrapnel, walls blistered with heat, but none of it touched him. He dismantled one turret with a borrowed energy blade, shearing through its core. Another he used as a shield until it exploded. Two more he disabled with what looked like a whistle, but was actually a sonic burst that shattered their targeting matrices. 30 seconds. That was all it took. And then the hallway was quiet again. Smoke curled in lazy trails. Shards of turret armor clinked across the floor. He adjusted his cuff. A voice crackled into silence, not from a speaker, from the air itself. A direct channel from the Citadel's command AI. Unknown combat protocol detected. Identity tag unregistered. State designation. He didn't respond. He resumed walking. State designation. The voice repeated, sharper now. He stopped at the edge of a security checkpoint. The guards there, 6 of them, didn't move. Their weapons were not lowered, but neither did they fire. Not after what they'd seen. Their eyes betrayed what their discipline tried to hide. They were calculating whether their lives were worth a shot. I am designated, he said finally. As an answer, he moved again. The guards did not stop him. Beyond the checkpoint, the corridor widened into a nexus chamber, a hub connecting 5 wings of Citadel. Grand, circular, lined with statues of former consuls, heroes from 1,000 systems. A statement of unity. History etched in stone. It was here the council had sent the real response. They arrived not like guards, but like predators. 20 of them, armored in adaptive cloaks, carrying weapons built from forbidden schematics, anti-phase rifles, neural disruptors, entropy blades. Special forces, killers. They didn't speak. They simply spread out around the chamber, herding him inward. One stepped forward, a tall being in armor that shimmered like obsidian dipped in starlight. She didn't need to identify herself. Her stance said everything. Leader, executioner, final measure, target, she said, voice devoid of inflection. You have breached Citadel combat neutrality. You will be terminated. The man looked at her, at them. Then, finally, he removed his jacket. It was not theatrical. No slow-motion flourish. Just methodical, precise. He folded it once, set it on the nearest statue's base, and loosened his collar. I warned them, he said, as if speaking to himself. I told them peace was earned, not demanded, that humans don't kneel. We adapt. We survive. And when we're cornered, he looked up, eyes catching the chamber's overhead glow. We become the thing you fear. The squad moved in. No command. No delay. Weapons fired in perfect sync. Beams and pulses, a web of annihilation. The floor erupted. The air screamed. And then, nothing. Their targeting HUDs flashed red. Missing. 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 Something struck the leader's flank. Hard. She stumbled. And in that half-second of broken formation, he was among them, not fighting, erasing. He moved with inhuman grace. One soldier went down with a twist of the neck, helmet shattering. Another's arm was redirected. His rifle spun midair and used to shoot his partner point blank. An entropy blade ignited, then shorted out as he plunged a shock spike into its emitter node. The leader tried to recalibrate, triggering a stasis field. He walked through it like mist. She barely had time to see him before he reached her. He didn't strike her. He didn't need to. He touched the chest plate of her armor. There was a flash, and then it collapsed inward, imploded silently, like a lung giving way under pressure. She dropped unconscious. 3 more tried to run. They didn't make it. 1 minute and 15 seconds. That was all it took to dismantle 20 of the galaxy's deadliest operatives. He stood in the center of the chamber, breathing only slightly harder than before. Blood and sparks painted the floor. His shirt was unmarked. Then came the sound. Not boots, not alarms. Clapping, slow, sarcastic. From above, a balcony overlooked the chamber, flanked by ornate banners of the founding races. And there, framed by gilded light, stood a figure wrapped in the gold-threaded robes of the High Council's first strategist. Remarkable, the old being drawled, voice like velvet over steel. Truly, humanity knows how to craft monsters. The man said nothing. You know what I admire most? The strategist continued. Not the speed, not the precision, but the restraint. You could have killed every being in the Citadel already, yet you haven't. Silence stretched between them. Why? The strategist asked. Why walk into a death trap, knowing we meant to erase you? The man looked up. Because Earth wanted an answer to, and now we have it. Which is? He stepped over the last body, eyes locked on the figure above. You're predictable, arrogant, and afraid. The strategist's smile twitched. Just for a second, the man turned and began walking away, not toward the exit, but deeper into the citadel. You won't get far, the voice called after him. No, he agreed, but I'll get far enough. Then he disappeared down the hall. And for the first time in the Citadel's long, terrible history, no one followed. The Citadel's upper stratospheric shell rotated slowly, its hull reflecting starlight in fractured gleams, as though the very station were reconsidering its place in the cosmos. Inside, tension had condensed into a thing tangible, thick in the air, sharp on every tongue. Word of the envoy's path had spread beyond the council's highest chambers, whispered now among technicians, custodians, low-ranking delegates. Rumors flickered to the datanet like sparks in dry brush. A human, alone, had walked through annihilation and left it behind like footprints. In the council's private war chamber, a cold, spherical void suspended above the Citadel's core reactor. 12 remaining members hovered in a ring of light, each encased in a preferred environment. Gas, fluid, gravity, vacuum. Across all differences of species and form, one emotion unified them. Disbelief laced with a corrosive bite of fear. Viral hovered slightly forward, her eye stalks twitching in the nutrient bath that encased her throne. The footage is clear. He accessed Protocol 77 Theta. He knows what we did. That information was sealed beyond top-tier encryption, growled Magistrate Elthorn, his quad-jointed form folding inward. There's no known system that could have bypassed it. He didn't bypass it. The strategist said from the shadow portion of the sphere. The system let him in. The silence that followed felt like a vacuum breach, quick, lethal. He triggered legacy access, someone muttered. The strategist nodded. The system recognized him, or something in him. Another counselor pulsed red through their translucent skin. Are you suggesting he is a descendant? A clone? A symbiont? Offered another, their voice fraying into digital noise. No. The strategist stepped forward into the light. I am suggesting we don't understand him, and that ignorance is no longer tolerable. They stared, for once, not at each other, but at the floor, at the silence gathering around them like a noose. Meanwhile, deep within the Citadel's core spine, the man walked to the oldest corridors, those built before the council had names, when the station was just a convergence of architects and fear. Lights flickered not from malfunction, but from memory. The walls had long since stopped defending themselves. They remembered the shape of dominance and recognized its evolution. He reached the prime relay node, one of the Citadel's most critical nerve centers, where communication between sectors, defense systems, and external satellites synchronized. Normally guarded by phalanxes of mechanoids and biometric failsafes, it now stood open, its internal AI silent, like a door left ajar after a storm. He stepped inside. Holograms bloomed to life around him, galactic maps, diplomatic trees, species threat indexes, trade flows, weapon caches. He ignored most of them. Instead, he summoned one file, Humanity Classification Contained. He stared at it for several seconds. Then he deleted it. The console blinked, processed, then rewrote the database. Humanity Classification Ascendant. He said nothing, but his expression hardened slightly, as if something had clicked into place, a key turning not just in a lock, but in a mind. A quiet beat pulsed behind him. Major Ward stepped into the room, her usual composure tight. They know. He nodded. They were always going to. They're preparing for war. I know. He turned toward her fully now. Will Earth stand down? She exhaled through her nose. We're not fools. We know we can't fight the entire Accord. He raised an eyebrow. But we're also not afraid to lose if it means they bleed enough to remember us forever. He studied her. Ward took a step closer, her voice lower. Are you planning to end this? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked up at the hologram slowly rotating above him, the full star map of Accord space. Worlds connected by centuries of trade, alliances, wars, lies. Entire civilizations have been constructed on the assumption that Earth would remain isolated, broken, compliant. We were exiled before we even understood what galaxy we were living in, he said. Now we understand. And we don't need their permission to belong here. Ward stepped beside him, following his gaze. What do you need, then? He looked at her, for once letting a trace of warmth, no humanity, into his voice. And ending, her brow furrowed. To what? To the myth that they're untouchable. Back in the council chamber, emergency procedures were initiated. Dozens of warships in high orbit around the Citadel began to reposition. Planetary defense nodes spun online. The Accord's Joint Command Center opened a line directly to the Citadel, warning of Earth's retaliatory fleet breaching the threshold of accepted neutral space. It was all happening faster than any protocol could interpret. The Grell representative, still buzzing with uncertainty, shouted over the chamber's cacophony, "We cannot let one species dictate the terms of galactic engagement." "Then stop them," Viral snapped. The room stilled again. No one moved, because no one could. Not anymore. The warships didn't receive authorization codes in time. The neutral space threshold remained breached. And then, as though the universe itself were offering a final test, the man in the suit returned to the council's hall. He stood there alone, hands behind his back, in the exact center of the chamber, precisely where Earth's envoy had once stood to request entry into the Accord and had been laughed out. The lights dimmed. The council, such as remained, encircled him in thrones of light and desperation. "You violated every law of diplomacy," the Grell member began, voice quivering. "No," he interrupted. "You burned the rule book centuries ago. I just refuse to pretend it still mattered. You want war." "No," he said, his voice calm and devastating. "I want recognition, but I won't beg for it. And if we refuse—" He looked at them one by one, holding their gazes. "Then this will be the last council you ever hold." A ripple of silence. The strategist stepped forward, the only one with the will to speak, without trembling. "What happens if we grant it?" The man in the suit didn't smile. He simply said, "Then I leave, and Earth will remember you were wise, and act accordingly." He turned then, walking back toward the arched entrance. At the threshold, he paused. "This isn't revenge," he said without turning. "It's equilibrium." Then he left, and none dared to stop him. Above the chamber, through transparent dome shields, the fleet of Earth shimmered against the dark starscape, holding still, watching, waiting. The Citadel, for the first time in its long reign, hesitated. The stars pulsed gently in the distance, indifferent to the tension that gripped the galaxy's most powerful station. The Citadel, once a monument to unshakable rule, now trembled, not from warheads or bombardment, but from a single truth delivered without fury, without weapon, without plea. And as silence settled where threats had once thundered, the galaxy began to listen. Inside a secluded observatory beneath the Citadel's central spire, Viral watched the Earth fleet in still orbit. Their formation was precise, not aggressive, not retreating, just present. It unnerved her more than any siege ever could. They had come not to destroy, but to be seen. And their envoy, the man in the suit, had already done what fleets and armies failed to achieve. He'd made the council uncertain. She reached for her neural relay, opening a direct channel to the one being whose counsel still carried weight. "Strategist," she said, her voice tightly controlled. "Yes," he answered, not with question, but with readiness. "We require clarity." "You require a new definition of power," he corrected gently, "and humility to match it." She exhaled. "Can we trust him?" There was a pause. "No," he said, "but you can respect him. And right now, that's the only currency left to you." Elsewhere, walking along the now uninhabited halls of the diplomatic wing, the man in the suit moved without guards, without fanfare. The council had not formally granted Earth the seat it was owed, nor had they rejected it again. In truth, they didn't know how to respond. And so he moved forward, as he always had, through uncertainty uninvited but unstoppable. He paused in front of a sealed chamber marked with the council's ancient dialect. Embassies of the disavowed. With a flick of his hand, the door recognized him. It opened slowly, hesitantly, like a creature that feared a light. Inside, hundreds of plinths stood, each etched with the names and emblems of species once considered unworthy of council representation. Some had been exterminated, others abandoned, and a few, like Earth, simply forgotten. The chamber had been meant as a mausoleum for diplomatic failures, an archive of arrogance. He walked between the plinths, silent. He stopped at the one bearing Earth's seal. Charred, misaligned, rejected. He placed a single gloved hand on its surface. It glowed. A faint hum resonated through the chamber as other plinths stirred, recognizing shared injustice. The chamber systems, dormant for centuries, began compiling a new list, not of failures, but of acknowledgments long overdue. Behind him, footsteps echoed. Major Alina Ward entered, posture stiff as ever. Councils assembling again. For what? To vote on Earth's entry. He didn't turn. They've already lost a vote that matters. They still need to feel like they've chosen. He said nothing for a moment, then with a quiet breath, then let them. Ward stepped beside him, eyes scanning the newly activated names glowing across the chamber. You knew this place was here. He nodded. They'd bury their shame in monuments. Easier to forget. She glanced at him. And what happens after the vote? That depends on whether they vote to change or just survive. At that moment, across the Citadel, a broadcast surged to every screen, panel, and neural uplink. The council chamber was live. No pretense. No secrecy. The vote was underway. A panel of lights began to illuminate, one by one, as each member voiced their decision. Recognition of Earth. The facilitator announced. Equal membership. Immediate granting of ambassadorial rights. Each member cast their vote with a simple phrase, aye or nay. Viral's eyes scanned the chamber before she said, aye. The Grell delegate followed, trembling, aye. Even the most isolationist among them, after a pause, conceded. One by one, the chamber filled with reluctant affirmation. Only one member, Elthorn of the Fractart block, abstained, his silence not out of defiance, but caution. The count proceeded without him. At last, the facilitator turned to the center of the chamber. The council recognizes Earth. Welcome, humanity. A strange silence followed, not triumphant, not celebratory, more like the moment after storm passes, and one is unsure what remains. And yet, far above, the Earth fleet did not fire. They did not advance. They remained suspended in silent geometry, disciplined as only the desperate could be. In the observatory, Viral stood alone, feeling the weight of the new order settle over her like an unfamiliar cloak. The strategist appeared beside her, seemingly from nowhere. You survived it. For now, she said. But survival isn't the same as absolution. He offered her a small, almost respectful nod. No, but it's a beginning. Down in the lower decks, where engineers and custodians watched the broadcast in disbelief, the name Earth appeared on the Citadel's official diplomatic index for the first time in recorded history, and with it, a ripple passed through the galaxy, one made not of fire but of recognition. In the embassy atrium, now active for the first time in centuries, the man in the suit stood in front of the door bearing Earth's seal. As it opened, he stepped inside. A single room, Spartan, functional, a place to speak, to negotiate, to be heard. Ward entered moments later. Well, she asked. He looked around. It's quiet. It won't stay that way. He nodded. I know. What do we do now? He glanced toward the stars beyond the chamber's wide viewport. Now, he said, we watch. And when the next forgotten world dares to knock on the council's door, he turned back to her. We answer. Ward smiled faintly. And if the council forgets again? He looked toward the endless night and said, without anger, then I remind them. And for the first time since he arrived, he sat down, not as a weapon, not as a threat, but as a representative of a world too long denied. Behind him, the seal of Earth glowed steady and bright. Outside, the galaxy turned.